There are 10 quiet, ordinary, almost invisible forces present in your financial life right now. Forces that have been draining you, if you are honest with yourself, for longer than you may be comfortable admitting. You might think you have a money problem. You don't. You have a habit problem. You are expanding your expenses to fill every raise. You are unconsciously letting your money flow where convenience leads it, rather than where intention would send it. You are funding your present with the future's resources. But hear this clearly, these are not character flaws. They are simply habits. They are the curated performances of a society that confuses activity with progress. A society that navigates the most consequential domain of material life without a considered, examined framework. The ancient Stoics understood a truth that modern neuroscience is only just confirming. Seneca understood it. Marcus Aurelius practiced it. Epictetus taught it from a school that owned almost nothing, yet produced some of the finest human beings in recorded history. The truth is this: wealth is not primarily a financial condition, it is a philosophical one. It is the state of a person who knows what they value, has built a life that reflects those values, and manages their resources with absolute intentionality. That person is not produced by a raise, they are produced by a practice. Today, we are going to expose these 10 invisible forces. We will name them not as an indictment, but as a map. If you want to stop the invisible drain on your life, you need to recognize which of these 10 habits is controlling you. Let's dismantle them, one decision, one morning, one habit at a time, starting with habit number 1. There is a number, you may not know it precisely, but somewhere beneath the noise of daily life, you feel its weight. It is the distance between what you earn and what you keep. Between the life you are living and the one you intended to build. Between the financial security that seemed inevitable when you were younger and the quiet, creeping recognition that it has not arrived. And here is the painful truth that most people are never told. That distance is not the result of bad luck. It is not the result of an unkind economy or insufficient income or forces beyond your control. It is the result of 10 habits, quiet, ordinary, almost invisible habits that are running in the background of your financial life every single day. Habits you did not consciously choose. Habits the culture installed in you before you were old enough to examine them. Habits that are, right now, as you listen to these words, costing you more than any market crash ever will. Tonight we name them all 10. With precision, with compassion, and with the ancient wisdom that understood the relationship between mind and money long before modern finance had the language to describe it. Stay with me. Welcome to the Infinite Library. Let's begin. Introduction: the silent financial sabotage. Before we examine the 10 habits, we need to understand something about the nature of financial destruction. Because when most people think about losing wealth, they picture a dramatic event. A market collapses, a failed investment, a medical catastrophe. A sudden and visible rupture in the financial fabric of their life. These things happen, but they are not the primary mechanism by which most people fail to build the life they could have built. The primary mechanism is slower, quieter, far more insidious. It is the accumulation of small decisions made automatically without examination, repeated thousands of times across decades, until the compound effect of those decisions has produced an outcome that feels like fate, but is, in truth, the precise mathematical result of habitual behavior. The ancient Stoics understood this with a clarity that modern financial culture has still not fully absorbed. Seneca wrote in the 1st century, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who hankers after more." He was not making a statement about income. He was making a statement about the mind that manages income. And that mind, its patterns, its defaults, its automatic responses to money, desire, fear, and comparison, is where all 10 of tonight's habits live. A 2024 study from the University of Chicago's Financial Decision-Making Laboratory followed 2,800 adults across 12 years and found that behavioral patterns, habitual financial responses, explained 81% of the variance in wealth accumulation outcomes, even after controlling for income level. 81% behavior, not income, which means that the solution to a financial problem is almost never more money, it is a different mind. And a different mind is built by examining, naming, and systematically replacing the habits that are currently running the show. Dear seeker, let us examine all 10. Habit 1, lifestyle inflation. The trap that grows with you. The first habit is the one that consumes more wealth than any other force in modern financial life. Not market crashes, not medical debt, not predatory lending, lifestyle inflation. The automatic, relentless, socially reinforced tendency to expand your expenditure to match and inevitably exceed your income at every single level of earning. Here is how it works. You earn more, and before the additional income has had any chance to become savings, investment, or security, it has already been spoken for. The better apartment, the newer car, the restaurant instead of the kitchen, the subscription that seemed reasonable at the new income level, the vacation that felt earned. None of these decisions feel like financial destruction. Each one feels like a reasonable reward for progress. That is the trap. Because while each individual expenditure expansion is defensible in isolation, the cumulative effect is the perpetual elimination of the gap between earning and keeping, which is the only gap from which wealth is ever built. Marcus Aurelius called this the tyranny of desire expanding with capacity. He wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." He was not advocating poverty. He was identifying the mechanism that the person who can only feel comfortable at their current level of expenditure has made their financial well-being entirely dependent on that level never decreasing. Which means that every raise, every bonus, every increase in income, if immediately absorbed by a corresponding increase in lifestyle, leaves them exactly where they started, financially. But now with higher fixed costs and less resilience. Consider Michael, a 35-year-old professional who had tripled his income over 8 years and arrived at a 6-figure salary with less financial security than he had on his first paycheck. Every income increase had been immediately met by a lifestyle expansion that seemed reasonable at the time. "I felt richer every year," he told researchers at the Cornell Behavioral Finance Lab. "But my actual financial position never improved. I was running on a treadmill at progressively higher speeds." The antidote to lifestyle inflation is not deprivation. It is the deliberate, conscious creation of a rule. When income increases, savings and investment increase proportionally before the lifestyle has a chance to expand into the new space. The Stoics called this living below your capacity. The wealthy call it the primary secret. Most people learn it too late. A person ascending a staircase, each step wider and more elaborate, but they are no higher than when they started. A river expanding its banks but losing its depth. A scale where both sides rise simultaneously, forever in balance, never tipping toward accumulation. Habit 2, unconscious spending. The invisible wealth drain. The second habit is the one that most people deny until they actually do the accounting. It is spending without awareness. Not reckless spending, not extravagant spending, not even particularly large spending. Simply spending that happens automatically, without attention, without intention, without any genuine examination of whether it serves the life being built. The subscription that was set up 2 years ago and never cancelled. The daily convenience purchase that has become invisible through repetition. The impulse acquisition that required no decision because the phone made it frictionless. Each one is small. The aggregate is devastating. A 2023 survey by the Financial Health Network found that the average American adult has approximately 32% more in recurring monthly expenditure than they consciously believe they have. Nearly a third of monthly spending is effectively invisible, occurring outside of awareness, below the threshold of decision. 1/3, not stolen, not lost, spent without consciousness. Epictetus was precise about this. He wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." The financial application is exact. Before the spending, the question, does this serve who I am becoming, not as a restriction, as an awakening, because unconscious spending is not primarily a money problem. It is an attention problem. The mind that is not watching its resources is not managing them. It is simply allowing them to flow wherever the current of habit and convenience carries them, which is rarely toward the destination of financial freedom. The practice is simple. Not easy, but simple. Once a month, every month, a full accounting, every recurring charge, every habitual expenditure, every automatic purchase, not to eliminate all of them, to make them visible. Because the moment an expenditure is visible, genuinely seen, genuinely examined, it must justify itself. And you will find, in that accounting, that a surprising number of the things your money is flowing toward are things you would not consciously choose if you were asked. They were never chosen. They were simply never stopped. Water leaking from a dozen small cracks in a vessel, each crack too small to notice, together emptying the whole. A person scrolling a phone, tapping purchase, unaware. Sand falling through open fingers, unhurried, constant. Habit 3, borrowed living. How debt rewires your future. The third habit is the one that the modern economy has made not just acceptable, but aspirational. It is the habit of borrowed living, the systematic use of debt not as a strategic financial tool, but as a way of life, a method of funding a present that the future has not yet earned. Credit cards, personal loans, buy now pay later arrangements, the financing of depreciating assets, the normalization of carrying balances as a permanent financial state, each one marketed as convenience. Each one functioning as a direct transfer of your future wealth to a financial institution in the present. The mathematics are unambiguous, and the Stoics would have recognized them immediately. A 2024 Federal Reserve report showed that the average American household carrying credit card debt is paying approximately 23% annual interest on that balance. At that rate, a $5,000 balance that is never fully paid becomes a $40,000 cost over 10 years, not through any dramatic misfortune. Through the steady, invisible compound of borrowed living. Seneca wrote, "He who borrows against the future robs himself of the present." He was not speaking of financial mechanics. He was speaking of psychological reality, because every dollar committed to debt service is a dollar that cannot be invested, cannot compound, cannot work for its owner. It is instead working against its owner, compounding in reverse. Elena was 42 years old when she sat down and calculated, for the first time with full honesty, what her accumulated consumer debt had cost her in total interest payments over 15 years. The number was not what she expected. It was not a single devastating debt. It was the sum of 20 years of small, reasonable-seeming borrowings, each individually justifiable, together forming a number that represented, by her own calculation, the equivalent of a full year of her income spent purchasing nothing. "I had been paying for choices I no longer remembered making," she said. "I was funding a past I had already lived with a future I was trying to build." The antidote is not the elimination of all debt. Strategic debt, borrowing to acquire appreciating assets, to invest in genuine capability, is a legitimate financial tool. The habit to eliminate is borrowing to fund consumption. Borrowing to make the present more comfortable than the future can afford. Borrowed living is the quiet agreement to be less free tomorrow in exchange for more comfortable today. The Stoic understood that this was never a trade worth making, a chain being forged link by link. A bridge with its foundations slowly sinking, the surface still standing, the structure already compromised. Someone walking forward with an invisible weight tied to their back. Habit 4, the comparison trap. Keeping up with GHOSTS, the fourth habit, is the one that has been accelerated to catastrophic scale by the technology of the last 20 years. But it is not new. The Stoics encountered it in ancient Rome, in the competitive display of wealth that characterized the imperial city, in the social pressure to present oneself at a level consistent with one's perceived status, in the quiet exhaustion of performing affluence for an audience that was performing it back. Marcus Aurelius named it with precision: how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it. He was speaking of emotional reactivity. But the same structure applies with perfect accuracy to financial comparison. How much more expensive are the consequences of social comparison than the actual social judgment being feared? Social comparison is not a personality flaw. It is a neurological mechanism, hardwired into the human brain by millions of years of evolution, in which relative status within a group was a matter of survival. Your brain is not malfunctioning when it tracks what others have. It is running ancient software in a modern environment for which that software was never designed. A 2022 study from Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School found that social comparison, spending, purchases made primarily to match or exceed the perceived financial level of peers, accounts for approximately 31% of all discretionary consumer spending. Not 31% of irresponsible spending, 31% of all discretionary spending. Nearly a third of every optional purchase is driven not by genuine need, desire, or value, but by the brain's ancient tracking system comparing your visible position to those around you. And today, those around you are not your neighbors. They are the curated, filtered, professionally lit financial and lifestyle presentations of millions of people, selected by an algorithm specifically designed to show you the most aspirational content, the most perfect homes, the most impressive travels, the most effortless abundance, at the highest frequency your attention can sustain. You are not keeping up with the Joneses, you are keeping up with ghosts, with images carefully constructed to generate precisely the comparison and aspiration you are currently feeling. The Stoic practice for this habit is not to eliminate social awareness. It is to develop, deliberately and consistently, what Marcus Aurelius called indifference to the opinion of those who have not examined their own opinions. To become, gradually, through practice, genuinely less interested in the financial performance of others and genuinely more interested in the alignment between your expenditure and your actual values. The person who does not need to display wealth is the freest person in the room. They are also, almost universally, the wealthiest. A hall of mirrors, each reflection slightly grander than the last, none of them real. Person staring at a glowing phone screen, surrounded by darkness. Two silhouettes, one watching the other with invisible longing. Habit 5, comfort spending. What you buy to feel better. The fifth habit is the one that sits at the intersection of emotional life and financial life, and it is far more common and far more costly than most people are prepared to acknowledge. It is comfort spending, the use of money not as a tool for building a life, but as a tool for managing a moment, for relieving stress, for rewarding effort, for filling the quiet discomfort of an ordinary Tuesday evening, for responding to disappointment, for celebrating progress, for numbing the particular ache of a life that is not yet what it was meant to become. Each individual instance is modest. Each individual instance is understandable. Together, they form a behavioral pattern that psychology calls emotional spending, and that the ancient Stoics would have recognized immediately as the conflation of two entirely separate questions. What do I need and what do I feel right now? A 2023 study from the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that individuals experiencing moderate emotional distress spent, on average, 47% more in the 48 hours following a stressful event than in their baseline spending periods, without any conscious awareness that the emotional state was influencing the financial behavior. 47% without awareness. The Stoics called this confusing the remedy for the illness. Because what comfort spending addresses is real, the stress is real, the discomfort is real, the need for relief is entirely human and entirely valid. But money is not the remedy for emotional pain. It is a temporary anesthetic for it, and like all anesthetics, it wears off, leaving the original pain, plus the financial consequence, plus the quiet shame of having responded to one problem by creating another. David was a 38-year-old architect who realized during a financial review with his partner that his highest spending months correlated almost perfectly with his highest stress months. The money wasn't going anywhere I had chosen, he said. It was going to whatever would make the afternoon feel less heavy. And the next month, there was less of it, which created its own stress, which created more of the same spending. The Stoic practice for comfort spending is the practice of the examined response. Before the purchase, one question: am I buying this because it serves my long-term well-being, or because I feel something right now that I am trying not to feel? This is not self-denial. It is self-knowledge. And self-knowledge, as every Stoic and every modern behavioral economist will confirm, is the beginning of every genuine financial improvement. A person reaching for something on a shelf, the camera revealing what they reach past to get there, a brief moment of relief, then the same expression returning. Warm light, small purchases, the quiet transaction of comfort for coins. Habit 6, the procrastination tax. What DELAYD investment costs? The sixth habit is the one that costs the most in absolute terms and produces the least visible damage in the short term. That is precisely why it is so dangerous. It is the habit of investment procrastination, the quiet, persistent, always reasonable delay of beginning to make your money work for you. Not because the intention is absent, because the urgency never arrives. There is always a more pressing financial obligation, a more immediate use for the available capital. A reason why next month, next year, when things are more stable, will be the right time to begin. And so the beginning is perpetually deferred. And the most powerful force in personal finance, compound growth, works against the person who waits with the same mathematical ruthlessness with which it works for the person who begins. The numbers are not abstract. A person who invests $500 per month, beginning at 25 years old, earning a 7% annual return, arrives at age 65 with approximately $1.3 million. The same person, beginning at 35 10 years later, with the same monthly investment and the same return, arrives at 65 with approximately $610,000. Same investment amount. Same rate of return. The 10-year delay costs $690,000, not because they invested less, because they started later. That is the procrastination tax. It is silent, it is invisible. It does not arrive as a bill, it arrives as a gap between the life that was available and the life that was actually built. Epictetus wrote, "If not now, when? If not you, who?" He was speaking of the practice of philosophy, but the principle applies with perfect precision to the practice of investment. The right time to begin is always now. Not because next month will be worse, because every month of delay is a month of compound growth that will never exist, and that month, once gone, is gone permanently. Two trees planted side by side, one 10 years earlier. The time lapse shows the gap between them widening irreversibly, a clock face. Compound interest visualized as a curve that begins flat, then rises steeply, the steepness beginning exactly where the delay ended. Habit 7. Confusing activity with progress. The busyness illusion, the seventh habit, is the one that the modern world celebrates even as it perpetuates financial stagnation. It is the habit of confusing activity with progress, of equating busyness with wealth building, of working harder and harder inside a system that has not been examined, without ever stepping back to ask whether the direction of the effort actually leads where you intend to go. Most people are not financially stagnant because they are lazy. They are financially stagnant because they are busy in the wrong direction. They work longer hours to earn more, without ever building a system that earns without their direct presence. They accumulate financial knowledge without ever making the single decision that translates knowledge into action. They optimize the details of their financial behavior, tracking, budgeting, comparing without ever addressing the structural reality that no amount of efficiency inside a broken system produces genuine wealth. The Stoics called this the problem of motion versus action. Motion is activity that feels productive but produces no output. Action is activity that directly creates a result. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." Applied to financial life. Never esteem an activity as wealth building that does not actually build wealth. The distinction between motion and action in finance is precise. Reading about investing is motion. Actually, investing is action. Thinking about a budget is motion. Writing and following a budget is action. Planning a business is motion. Registering the business and making the first sale is action. The painful truth is that motion feels almost identical to action from the inside. Both involve effort. Both consume time. Both produce the psychological reward of feeling engaged with the goal. But only one of them moves the number. Arjun was 44 years old when his financial advisor asked him a question he had never been asked. "You have been studying personal finance for 6 years. How much of what you have learned have you implemented?" The answer was a number he had never calculated. "Less than 15%, he said. 6 years of motion, 15% action. The remaining 85%, the gap between knowing and doing, was the seventh wealth-killing habit, running quietly in the background of a man who considered himself financially diligent. The antidote is not more knowledge. It is the discipline of identifying one specific action this week, not a goal, not a plan, not a decision to decide, and doing it completely today. A person running fast on a treadmill, the background never changes. Books open everywhere, but no pen moving. A wheel spinning freely without contact with the road, energy without traction. Habit 8, living without a financial philosophy. The eighth habit is the one that underlies all the others. Because without it, every individual financial correction is a patch applied to a system that has no foundational architecture. It is the habit of living without a financial philosophy. Without a set of considered, examined, personally owned principles that govern how money is earned, held, grown, and spent, independent of mood, circumstance, social pressure, or the financial culture's perpetually shifting recommendations. Most people have a financial style, a habitual set of behaviors, preferences, and responses that have accumulated over a lifetime of observation, imitation, and default. But a style is not a philosophy. A style is what you do without thinking. A philosophy is what you have decided through genuine examination that you believe, and what you return to when the situation becomes difficult. The Stoics built their entire lives on philosophy as a practical discipline, not as an academic interest, but as the operating system that made every decision coherent. Seneca wrote, "Philosophy promises above all common sense, humanity, and community. For financial life, common sense means knowing precisely where you are and where you intend to go. Humanity means understanding the psychology driving your financial behavior. Community means recognizing that your financial decisions exist within a web of relationships and responsibilities that philosophy helps you navigate with integrity. A financial philosophy contains three elements. First, a clear statement of what wealth is for, not abstractly but specifically for you: security, freedom, impact, legacy. The specific answer changes every financial decision that follows. Second, a clear set of rules, not guidelines, rules about how money is managed. What percentage of income is saved before anything else is spent? What categories of debt are permitted and which are never? What financial behavior is non-negotiable regardless of circumstance? Third, a regular examination, the Stoic evening review applied to financial life, in which actual behavior is held against stated philosophy with honesty and precision. Without this philosophy, every financial improvement is fragile. With it, the individual habits, all 10 of the ones we are examining tonight, fall into place. Because the person who knows what they believe about money and why, and what they have committed to regardless of how they feel today, that person has something that no market movement, no social comparison, no emotional weather can take from them. A foundation, and foundations are where all genuine wealth begins. Architect laying a foundation before walls exist, a compass on an open map, ancient philosophers' scrolls beside a modern ledger. The difference between a structure with roots and one standing on sand. Habit 9, the scarcity mindset. How poverty thinks the 9th habit is the most invisible of all 10. Because it does not manifest as a behavior, it manifests as a framework, a lens through which every financial situation is perceived, interpreted, and responded to. It is the scarcity mindset. The deep, often unconscious orientation toward money as something that is fundamentally insufficient, perpetually threatened, and unlikely to be permanently secured, regardless of how much is actually present. Research from Harvard economists Senthil Mullainathan and Elder Schaefer, published in their landmark book Scarcity, documented a phenomenon they called the bandwidth tax. The finding that chronic scarcity thinking consumes cognitive capacity equivalent to approximately 13 IQ points. Not because the person is less intelligent, but because the persistent mental preoccupation with insufficiency occupies the working memory that would otherwise be available for strategic, long-term financial thinking. The mind that is consumed by scarcity cannot access the thinking required to escape it. The ancient Stoics understood this through a different vocabulary. Epictetus wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." He was describing, with philosophical precision, the same phenomenon the Harvard economists would document 21 centuries later. The scarcity mindset is not caused by poverty. It is caused by the relationship with money, by the belief, installed early and rarely examined, that there is never enough, that security is always provisional, that the ground beneath the financial self can shift at any moment. And that belief, regardless of income, produces exactly the financial behaviors that confirm it: impulsive short-term decisions at the expense of long-term strategy. Avoidance of financial planning because the reality feels too threatening to examine. The exhausting hypervigilance of a mind that cannot rest in its financial situation, regardless of how objectively secure that situation may be. The antidote is not affirmation, it is evidence. Specifically, the deliberate accumulation of evidence through financial reviews, through the completion of the Stoic evening review applied to money, through the tracking of actual progress over time, that the scarcity story is not the whole truth. That there is, in fact, more than the fearful mind believes, and that the ground, built carefully and examined regularly, is more solid than it feels. A person looking at a full glass and seeing it empty, hands gripping something tightly that is already secure. Two identical rooms, one perceived as cramped, one as spacious, the perception being the only difference. Habit 10, not paying yourself first. The 10th habit is the simplest. And perhaps because of its simplicity, it is the one most consistently violated. It is the habit of not paying yourself first, of treating your own financial future as the last claim on your income, the residual recipient of whatever happens to remain after every other obligation has been met. The employer is paid first. The landlord or bank is paid first. The utility companies, the subscriptions, the food, the transport, all paid first. And then, if anything remains, you. This is not just a financial strategy failure, it is a philosophical one. Because it encodes, at the level of behavior, a belief about your own financial life, that it is less urgent, less valid, less deserving of priority than every external claim upon it. The Stoics would have recognized this immediately as a form of voluntary servitude, not to a master, but to a system. The principle of paying yourself first, of treating savings and investment as a fixed commitment that precedes all discretionary spending, not follows it, is the single most validated behavioral change in the history of personal finance research. A 2021 meta-analysis of 47 savings intervention studies published in the Journal of Economic Behavior found that automatic savings mechanisms, systems in which savings are transferred before discretionary spending becomes available, produce savings rates 3 to 4 times higher than equivalent intentions without automatic mechanisms. Not because people were more committed, because the behavior was structured to remove the decision entirely. Seneca wrote, "Begin at once to live." In the financial context, begin at once to build. Not after the bills, not with the remainder, not when income is higher or life is simpler or the moment feels right. Now, even if the amount is small, even if it feels symbolic at first. Because the habit of paying yourself first is not primarily about the amount. It is about the declaration it makes, that your financial future is real, that it is worthy of priority. That it exists not as a distant hope, but as the first commitment every month, before anyone else, before the world, yours, a single seed being planted before a garden is built. A foundation stone being laid, a hand placing the first coin in an empty jar, not the last. 10 habits. 10 quiet, ordinary, almost invisible forces that have been, if you are honest with yourself, present in your financial life in some form, to some degree, for longer than you may be comfortable admitting. Let me name them once more, not as an indictment, as a map. Habit 1, lifestyle inflation, expanding your expenditure to fill every increase in income, leaving no gap from which wealth can grow. Habit 2, unconscious spending, the invisible drain of money flowing where habit and convenience lead it, rather than where intention would send it. Habit 3, borrowed living, funding the present with the future's resources, compounding in reverse. Habit 4, the comparison trap, making financial decisions based not on your values, but on the curated financial performances of people you have never met. Habit 5, comfort spending, using money to manage emotional states rather than to build a life. Habit 6, the procrastination tax, deferring the beginning of investment until the compounding that was available has quietly, permanently disappeared. Habit 7, confusing activity with progress, moving without advancing, knowing without acting, planning without executing. Habit 8, living without a financial philosophy, navigating the most consequential domain of material life without a considered, examined framework to navigate it by. Habit 9, the scarcity mindset, perceiving insufficiency regardless of reality, and making decisions from that perception that confirm what the mind feared. Habit 10, not paying yourself first, treating your own financial future as the last claim on your income. Encoding in behavior the belief that everyone else's call on your money is more urgent than your own. These are not character flaws, they are habits. And habits, the Stoics knew this, modern neuroscience confirms it, And every genuine financial transformation in history demonstrates it. Habits can be changed, not through willpower alone. Through the patient, deliberate, imperfect, but sustained practice of choosing differently, one decision at a time, one morning at a time. 1 month of paying yourself first, before you were entirely certain you could afford to. 1 evening review in which you looked honestly at where the money went and asked whether it had gone where you would have chosen. 1 moment of noticing a comfort purchase before making it and asking the question. These are not dramatic transformations. They are the small, consistent movements from which all genuine financial change is made. And here is what I want to leave with you tonight. The truth that Seneca understood and Marcus Aurelius practiced and Epictetus taught from a school that owned almost nothing and produced some of the finest human beings in recorded history. Wealth is not primarily a financial condition. It is a philosophical one. It is the state of a person who knows what they value, has built a life that reflects those values, and manages the material resources of that life with the same intentionality and wisdom they bring to every other domain of genuine importance. That person is not produced by a raise, they are produced by a practice, and you already know, having spent this hour inside the infinite library, that you are capable of both. Drop in the comments right now which of the 10 habits hit closest to home, which one are you addressing first? I read every single comment. Keep reading, keep thinking. And never stop asking what it means to be truly free. This has been the Infinite Library. Thank you for these extraordinary hours together. Stay with me.